Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, hi there, ho there, and all the ships at sea, or something to that effect. Yes, I am the aforementioned Lynn Cullen, and it is March 13, 2024, a year that will live in our hearts, our guts, our memories, and the history books, no doubt. Today's show is sort of a test of whether or not an old lady can somehow manage to do a coherent 1 hour podcast doing both the tech aspect and the content aspect on about 90 minutes, I would say, at best, of sleep, after which I awoke and stumbled around and doused myself with an entire bottle of Diet Coke. That would have been inadvertently. And now here I sit, slightly damp, but having done the tech stuff, gotten the show on, and here we go. We'll see what happens, okay? So I read that this is all apropos of nothing in particular, and I often start by saying, so I've read, because that seems to be all I do. I read. One of the things I read, and at first I thought, yes, because you're always proud. It said that Pittsburgh got a shout out for something from USA Today. And what it was is it said that USA Today has named PNC Park the best Major League Baseball park in the country. Yay, said I, which was immediately followed by, I'd much rather have the best Major League team in the country. To hell with a facility. It's what you put on it, in it. Jeez. And it's a shame that such a glorious venue, and it is, should have such a beleaguered team. And I cast no aspersions on the players. Zero, none. This is all on ownership. God. So, okay, that's my first little. My second, did you trouble yourself at all? No audio? I'm hearing no audio. Is it just me? Oh, shit. Has this finally happened? Somebody tell me. Anybody hearing me? Fucking duck. Oh, someone can hear me. Thank you, Data. Thank you, Mab. Thank you. Okay, Gigi, it's you. God, don't scare me like that. Thank you. Remember, this is a test. And a little old lady, and it turns out so far so good. Jeez. I almost went into panic mode there. Oh my God, you even got Kevin's listening. And he can hear me. Kevin, bless you. Thank you. You don't, Kevin. God, Kevin's the one who taught me. So I'm just so good at this. And I have to say, Kevin, even though I am absolutely breathing, I'm working on fumes. I am so exhausted I can't see straight. and my brain is blown. And yet, I swear I did all the tech stuff, the dip, dip, bet, 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 getting all the things up. I swear I did it in about 3.5 minutes. Bang, 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 bang. I couldn't believe it, which is why I was willing to believe that I'd screwed up something and didn't have audio. But be that as it may. Did any of you trouble yourself yesterday watching or listening to any of that god-awful, why do we do this to ourselves? A Republican hearing, this one, to further amplify a special counsel, the guy named Hur, as in Ben, his wondrous report saying that there was nothing criminal that he could charge President Biden with in regard to his retention of some government files. But he did this gratuitous thing in the report, as we all know, suggesting that Biden was a dithering old man who couldn't even remember the date of his own son's death, and blah, blah, blah. A well-meaning, dithering, blithering old fart. Okay, so the best back and forth that I caught was Swalwell. Why do I have trouble saying that? Can you say that easily? Swalwell? 2 double L's. And I have to say that in Pittsburgh, a Pittsburgh native, L, just one L, is a bit of a heavy lift. That's why Pittsburghers don't say things like Steelers. They say Steelers. So the L is something that we don't do well. So Swalwell. But I have to swallow well. I think what it is it requires, if you think about it and do it yourself, it requires physical exertion. In order to do that, your mouth has to move, it has to go open, your tongue has to like swallow, it has to go up to the roof of your mouth, and it's got to come back down to do the well. It's just a lot of work. And one of the reasons I think some people are difficult to understand when they speak is because they don't do the work. That's all I'm saying. So I'm looking for this exchange because I wrote it down here. Okay, so Swalwell said to Ben-Hur, you said to President Biden, quote, you appear to have a photographic understanding and recall. Now that Swalwell got from the transcript that was released right before this hearing occurred, the transcript of Hur's questioning of the president. And so Swalwell said, you said to President Biden, you appear to have a photographic understanding and recall. Did you say that? He said to her. Hur, who was incapable the entire day of saying yes or no, said, those words do appear in the transcript. Swalwell says, they never appeared in your report. Hur says, it does not appear in my report. Interesting. Case closed. Stop. That's it. Slam dunk. They should have adjourned. Everybody go. The fact of the matter is, this SOB Hur told the president while interviewing him, you appear to have a photographic understanding and recall. And that doesn't make it into the report. What makes it into the report is that he can't remember with his hugely incredible photographic recall. He can't remember the date of his son's death. And having said that, let me also say this. I can never remember the date of anything. It has nothing to do with my age. I never could. I'm always blown away when somebody says, you've been doing this show for fill in the blank, 15, 17, 20 years. I don't know. Really, I say, when did I start? I don't have the slightest idea. I remember a few dates. I do. When I was born, when I graduated from high school. I don't know when I graduated from college because I didn't do it on time. I could probably work it out. It'd be 70, I don't know, 9 or something, 78. I have no idea. I don't remember the year my father died. I remember the day because it was January 1. Hard to forget that. Happy New Year. I don't remember dates. And this idea that everybody does, boy, would I make the worst witness. I mean, even when they say, what were you doing on Thursday? I don't know. In fact, right after I finish a show like this, if I bump into somebody and they say, what'd you talk about on the show today? I don't know. I think, don't have a clue. And yet, my brain works really well in a lot of ways. It just doesn't do dates. It doesn't do numbers. That's all. Thank you all for being there in my chat. And by the way, now that I'm doing this, I can see you can talk to me that way. Although I don't always have that screen up, just so you know, because I have to check to see if anybody's calling. Okay, just so you know. But I'm getting better at all of that. Okay, so on we go. Hey, the guy won the Iditarod. The guy, CV, he won it. He now is the record holder for most wins of the Iditarod ever. Dallas CV, the guy who pulled out a gun and shot the moose and saved his dog and didn't properly gut the moose and then had to be penalized, and yet he still managed to win. Dallas CV, ladies and gentlemen, and the dog, after 2 surgeries, is going to live. Can't beat it. And while we're on the subject, okay, wait, sorry. Just checking emails. That's a whole other screen. Um, um, while we're on the subject of animals, I came upon, that is so I don't say again, I came upon an interesting tidbit today. You know how we have this assumption that the male of the species is bigger and stronger than the female? Right? I mean, it's not just humans, it's every animal, right? That's what we all think. And guess what? We're wrong. I believe it is true of Homo sapiens that the male tends to be bigger than the female. Not always, obviously. I've looked down at a lot of men, I'll tell you that. But it turns out the actual numbers, somebody, because these things, there's a reason we think that, right? If you live in a male dominated culture, well, males get elevated and females are always being sort of sublimated and reduced. But a new analysis of a diverse array of more than 400 mammalian species shows that indeed the male of the species outweighs the female in 45% of the species. Hey guys, that ain't 50, and it ain't 100, and it ain't even 75. It's not overwhelming. In fact, it's under 50. 45%, and we'd be one of them. Generally speaking, the male outweighs the female. But in almost as many, 39%, both sexes are the same. They have the same mass. You can't tell one from the other in terms of weight or hugeness, largeness, small, whatever. They're the same. And in 16%, females are the heavier sex. But so this idea, I always had it, didn't you? So I love being disabused of something I know is true. Seriously. A postdoctoral researcher at Purdue and the author of the study, which was published in blah, 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 Nature Communications, says, what we found is that there is no norm. What? You mean the male is not the big bad male? Not the always tough, strong, bigger than? Really? Imagine. Oh, God. All right, guys. Oi, I think I'm overcompensating for being so tired. I'm sort of, am I talking too loud? I feel like I am. Anyway, whatever. So I do have, is there anything I need to talk about in the news part? Um, I don't want to talk about you know who today. I just can't. I can't bear it. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, I came upon again a cute story about a guy in Hollywood who you may or may not know. He's an actor and I think sort of a comedian. Well, I think he's funny. His name is Zach Galifianakis. Galifianakis. Must be Greek, right? And I think I know him mostly because I was the mother of a young son who, for some reason, I know this guy. And this story, it turns out before he'd made it, before he got into movies, he was at a laundromat in, I guess, LA. And he met an old woman there. Her name was Marie, although she called herself Mimi Haste. And the laundromat let her sleep there. She was homeless. Let her sleep there if she, cleaned up and helped customers in any way that she could, which she did. They would sometimes tip her. So she was only allowed to sleep between the washers and dryers. And he was in there doing his laundry. She became homeless after she was divorced and had been homeless for decades. Galifianakis was he had yet to get into a movie. He was in fact trying to do stand-up, and He was so appalled that this old woman was sleeping in between the washers and dryers that he found her an apartment and paid the rent. He found her an apartment. That's better than grudgingly giving somebody a buck. Huh? He found her an apartment and paid the rent. And then he became a Hollywood star. It was Bradley Cooper in the movie, I think, The Hangover, which was his breakout. And after he became a Hollywood star with all the money that brings and all the attention, he maintained this strong bond with Mimi and continued to pay for her apartment and even brought her to a red carpet event as his date once. She was quoted in this article saying, "If Zach's in town, he takes me. I dress up nice and a friend helps me with my makeup. It's fun, not something I've ever dreamed I'd experience. And the limo takes me home afterward." He did that and cared for her for 27 years until she died at the age of 96. How nice is that story? Hmm? Oh, for heaven's sake, Tracy's saying, yeah, he really took care of her. The laundromat on Montana in Santa Monica. It's no longer there. So oh, wow, you knew this. Wow. And Data Blueprint says that, speaking of animals, males and females, that regarding the Hayes eagles, the bald eagles that have the camera on them that many of us have watched for many years, the female is noticeably larger than the male. Just saying. So I'm saying babbity yabbity 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 yeah because I'm loath to admit to myself that I pretty much used all the stuff I have here that is what I consider light. Whoa, which means that now I'm going to get heavier, but I do not want to intone the name of that god awful human being, okay? Now, there was this one of the things in Biden's State of the Union address that he said, and to which the Republicans sat on their butts and hands, was that it was time to pay school teachers more. And I read a really interesting thing. Actually, I had told you about this new column that was going to start up in the Washington Post, and this was its first entry, and the column is called "Why Not?" And in it, the columnist, a guy named Daniel Pink, puts out seemingly what we would say is, well, that's ridiculous, that's impossible, solutions to an issue, a problem, and then buttresses why it's conceivable and why we need to maybe be willing to think about it. And the first one he did was, why not pay teachers $100,000 a year? Well, he makes a hell of a case. And in making the case, he shows us what we as a culture value. And since teachers teach our children, I would argue, even though he doesn't, that it says we do not value our children as we should. Oh, we do if we can pull them out of public schools and stick them in private schools. Oh man, people with money value their children ridiculously. But he talks about a teacher. He starts out, just for instance, a teacher in Lancaster, PA, at the middle school there, taught Spanish. And yes, I'm using the past tense. This guy loved being a teacher. Gerald, no, that's not his name. Yeah, no, it's not. DePerna, Adam DePerna. And first of all, he summarizes this teacher's day. So stay with me here because we forget. He arrived in his classroom at 7:10 a.m. He had no time the entire morning for a bathroom break. He taught back to back to back to back classes until his lunch period that was 27 minutes long, in which he had to heat and eat the food he brought from home, email parents about problems or absences, and field questions from students. Then he did his afternoon teaching. Then, after school, he coached wrestling. He advised the student council and chaired the world language department. He went home. He often had to grade papers, to prepare lessons. He had a wife and 3 children he wanted to spend more time with. He had a college degree from Bucknell, and he had a master's degree in education. And he earned less than any college graduate he knew. So last year, after struggling and worrying about his own children and being able to help them, after 15 years in the classroom, he quit. And he took a job as, God help him, a sales rep at a packaging company. He's 42 years old. He said, I wanted to be a public servant. I didn't get into teaching to make a lot of money, but I also didn't get into it to barely scrape by. He earned more in less than a year, the first year, as a corrugated cardboard salesman than he did in his 15th year as a teacher. What's wrong with this picture? We hear about all the problems. Test scores are falling, absenteeism rising. 44% of American schools have a shortage of teachers. Why would anybody get into this? And then think of what teachers are enduring in red states or red districts. Why would anybody for the paltry pay? But then remember what they're there to do, to educate our children. So if we're serious about having good teachers and about retaining good teachers, then you damn well better understand that we got to treat them like other professionals are treated. College graduate, master degree holders are treated. And compensation is obviously number one. Teachers earn 74 cents on the dollar compared with comparably educated professionals. Again, that tells us something about ourselves. Pink, who's writing this, says, nothing against actuaries whose median salary is $114,000 a year. But isn't helping a first grader learn to read as valuable as assessing insurance premiums on your Hyundai Elantra? And obviously, the why not part, the what part is the cost. $100,000. He says, yeah, that would probably, to get all the millions of public school teachers in the country up to that, would cost minimally $100 billion. Well, $100 billion we spend in just 5.5 weeks on Medicare. That's under half the Pentagon's just weapons budget. It's a huge sum. So he says if it ever has a chance, and I don't think 100 has a chance, he suggests there should be a longer school year. If you're going to pay these people, and we're worried about our kids, then stop with this nonsense of 8.5, 9-month school year. I mean, we're not gestating a fetus. So eliminate summer break. I mean, the whole 9-month school year, what is that from? It's because I think kids used to have to get out for the summer to help with the crops. I don't know. And then he talks about the fact that there should be greater accountability for teachers. Now, this will get the teachers' union people in a huff. He says many teachers are excellent, some are heroic, but any parent knows that a few just aren't up to the job. And under current employment arrangements, it's almost impossible to get underperformers out. And with pay based solely on seniority, mediocre teachers certainly lack incentive to leave or to improve. What difference does it make? So if you really are going to treat teachers like other professionals, you're going to have to be able to get rid of the bad ones. And then I know you're saying, well, who are the bad ones? Who makes that subjective decision? Anyway, so he says there's something in this for everybody to hate, right? Uh, this would require raising taxes. That'll enrage conservatives. And being able to fire underperforming teachers would infuriate liberals. So he says, so far, so good. And then he goes back to DePerna, the former teacher in Lancaster. And he said to DePerna, would you have stayed if you were making 100,000? And DePerna said, look, I wasn't looking to make a fortune. $100,000? That would have been enough for me. What do we value? It always drives me crazy that value, and I understand, is often equates to money. So what you make somehow defines whether or not you are valued. That has always so rankled me because, well, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into for obvious reasons. Some of the hardest work, well, okay, just you don't have to, just don't. And speaking of the kids, God help them, huh? I came upon, um, hang on, I'll find it. I'll find it. Um, I came upon this article in the Atlantic, which talks about our children and how horribly wrong things have gone for them. You've read articles, you've seen headlines, rates of depression and anxiety in kids is just skyrocketed. The suicide rate rose 48% for kids from the age of 10 to 19. Suicide rate for girls age 10 to 14 rose 131%. This is in the last decade. And in fact, right before COVID. And as we know, COVID totally upended kids because of school closings and all of the constrictions it placed on them and all of us. And the thing is that this is not just an American problem. Similar depression, anxiety, all this kind of thing. Some of these problems are evident in the Nordic countries, in New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada. They're all around. And what these numbers are really looking at is what's called Generation Z. That's anybody born 96 and after. But that mental health decline and suicide and all that is just one thing. They're more friendless. They're more lonely and alienated. Their troubles don't go away when they enter the workforce and start looking for partners. They date less. They're having less sex. They show much less interest in ever marrying or having children. They were less likely to get jobs as teenagers. And managers say they are much harder to work with. They're shyer, they're more risk averse, and less ambitious. That creep, Sam Altman, who was one of the founders of OpenAI, he noted that for the first time since Silicon Valley became a thing, there's not a single preeminent entrepreneur in Silicon Valley under the age of 30, when there used to be pretty much that's what you got, 20 somethings. And Altman said, I don't know what it is, but something has gone really wrong. Really wrong. So, this article goes on to say, so what the hell happened? And then obviously a lot of things happened, but the AI guy should know that one of the big things that happened was the smartphone. And that takes us, again, around the globe. The smartphone, which is designed for addiction, designed supposedly to connect you, but in fact has a tendency to isolate. So the author of this says that once young people began carrying the entire internet in their pockets, it altered their daily experiences and developmental pathways across the board. Friendship, dating, sexuality, exercise, sleep, academics, politics, family dynamics, identity, all. And the guy who wrote this is a social psychologist. And he says that we have pretty much eviscerated what the childhoods that us old folks had. I mean, I even saw it before all of this, before the smartphone, in all of that, stranger danger and walking kids to bus stops and not letting kids just run around and play like we did. We were feral. We were free. And it created independent spirits. And we failed and we got in risky situations. All of that's great. That makes for a great childhood. And then, so it was like in the 80s that we started just systematically depriving children and adolescents of that kind of freedom, of unsupervised play. And I want to note, because I live in a neighborhood with a lot of kids, I don't see any of them working like in the yard. I work in the yard. I'm the only person I know who works in their own yard in my neighborhood. But when I was a kid, you shoveled the snow, you raked the leaves, you took the garbage out, you did that kind of thing, you walked the dog. I see none of that. None. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I see none. But this guy says these kids, our kids now, are growing up in a world, this phone-based childhood, and it's making them sick, and it's blocking their progress to being able to flourish in adulthood. He goes on to say we need a dramatic cultural correction, and we need it now. What do you think the chances of that are? Human childhood, unlike a lot of other animals, think of a poor bird, just think of that, the poor little eaglets there. They're just going to be tossed out of the nest, right? Sink or swim. Human childhood is this extended cultural apprenticeship, is it not? We get like a almost 2-decade, even more, apprenticeship. And if you look at it that way, you can see things that shouldn't be in the development. So when their brains are wiring up, they shouldn't be. I'll stop because this guy goes on to say that another crucial aspect of play is children's work. And again, unsupervised play. One crucial aspect of play is physical risk taking. Yeah. This is how you, and we have removed, and that sort of almost desire for risk taking actually increases in adolescence, right? Just saying, right? Where if you fail at the risk taking, the consequences could be a lot more serious. But young people who are deprived of opportunities for risk taking as children and as adolescents and young adults will, on average, develop into anxious, much more anxious, and risk averse adults. We've changed childhood. Parents, spurred on by hysteria reporting from media, right? Be afraid, be very afraid. So the parents got scared that their children would be harmed or abducted if left unsupervised. Remember the missing children pictures on the milk cartons? Dear God. Nothing put in context. Nothing. I don't know. This guy says, in recent decades, seeing an unchaperoned child outdoors has become so novel that when you see one in the wild, some adults call the police, right? And then parents are called negligent. So overprotection is part of the story, but technology allowed those kids to explore the world in different ways without their parents bothering them as much. And I don't know why parents didn't realize that the world the kids are inhabiting on their phones in the privacy of their bedrooms is actually truly much more dangerous than that world outside that they deprived their child of discovering and exploring. So we got a problem. And I don't know how we pull it back because the phone's not going anywhere. The kids' brains are being wired totally differently. And I get the argument that, well, they're going to be inhabiting a world that is all wired. So to deprive a child of having its brain wired to be in a wired environment, that might be depriving that child because we cannot conceive of the world that they're going to inhabit. I don't know. And we haven't even got into the bullying that goes on, the way it's changing. I've been reading so many things about girls, especially, dear God in heaven, um, that are starting like these sort of crazed self-care beauty routines uh, as young as 8 and 9. Where I, I, Susan was talking the other day about watching those old movies and getting so angry at what the what a woman, as we grew up, what we saw as our possibilities for being a woman, and they were so incredibly limited, and the ideals of what we could aspire to. It's so much worse now. It's so much worse now. And the capitalists and the beauty industry is coming for your kids, and they're succeeding. If you go into a Sephora or what's that other one, Ulta or whatever it is, I don't go into them. But if you go into those places, the age of the people in them are incredibly young. They are spending huge amounts on this crap to change the way they look because they're never right. So, I started out by talking about these horrific rates of suicide, anxiety, depression among kids. Um, is it any wonder? So I don't know. I don't know what we can do. And I feel for parents. I don't know what they can do. I see my nieces and nephews, and they're all like much more involved. Good God, much more involved in their children's lives than my parents were or that I was in mine. And I can see how that's good in a lot of ways. And then I also, though, wonder, is it also bad? Again, that's sort of like, just leave them alone. But is that the right thing to do now? To leave them alone in a world in which they'll be alone with a smartphone? I don't know. I just don't know. This article is very, very long. And toward the end, just to have some more of a conclusion, he says an essential function of government is to solve problems. Excuse me for laughing. Congress could raise the age of what he calls internet adulthood to 16 and require technology companies to keep underage children off. Even if their parents won't, you keep them off. But Congress, can't do anything. Can't even agree on renaming a post office. There are a lot of organizations, he says, most of them started by parents who saw what smartphones had done to their kids. One is called letgrow.org. If you're interested. And parents are unhappy, kids are unhappy, parents are fed up with what childhood has become. Many are tired of having daily arguments about technologies that were designed to grab hold of their children's attention and not let go. We can begin. Well, this is what you have to do when you write this kind of a terrifying article. We didn't know what we were doing in the early 2010s. Now we do. And it's time to end the phone-based childhood, is the last line of that piece. I feel for these kids. God, I feel for them. Again, if you'd like to, it's a long, long article. The Terrible Costs of a Phone-Based Childhood by Jonathan Haidt, and it's in The Atlantic. But I really think it's... Okay, can I think of something good? Can I think of something good to end on? Can I think of something good to end on? No, I can't. But I think I passed the test of can a totally sleep-deprived old lady with a Diet Coke soaked t-shirt do the tech and do the content and get through, and I think I did. So I'm proud of that. And I'm now going to stumble forward into the rest of my day. I'm going to do more yard work. I will not see another human being doing that. As a matter of fact, when I first moved to this neighborhood, I was out doing yard work. This would be 35 years ago. And this sweet old man, he's still a sweet old man, a lot older, came across the street and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I don't know, I'm raking. I forget what I was doing. And he said, "Nobody does that around here. You hire people to do that." I said, "Well, I come from people who certainly had the money to hire somebody to do it, but it was considered something you did yourself, or you made your kids do it. Shoveling, raking, weeding, planting, caring." And believe me, I'm the only one too who doesn't use a friggin' leaf blower. I don't disturb my neighbors when I'm doing my work. I'm just saying. And that was just to get me to the end of the hour. Okay. Thank you all for being there, and I'm going to try to get some sleep sometime and be back tomorrow. Sounds like an idea. So, toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live. Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.